The first time I saw the envelope taped to my garage door, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a friendly reminder from a neighbor or a coupon flyer from the pizza place down the street. It was a violation notice from my HOA. Bold red letters screamed across the top. Fine issued, $75. The reason? I had left my garage door open for 2 hours on a Sunday afternoon. That was it. No warning, no conversation, no neighborly knock on the door, just a fine. At first, I laughed in disbelief, thinking there must be some mistake. But the HOA meant business. They had photographic evidence, grainy security cam footage of my half-open garage door. The notice warned that if I didn't pay within 14 days, the fine would double and additional penalties could follow. I didn't realize it yet, but this ridiculous $75 fine was just the opening shot in a battle that would change my entire neighborhood. I told myself it wasn't worth the stress. Just pay it, move on, and keep the garage closed at all costs. But something in me rebelled. Why should I hand over money for something so harmless? I wasn't blocking traffic. I wasn't endangering anyone. My garage just happened to be open because I was fixing my bike. That's when I started digging. I pulled out the HOA bylaws, the thick, jargon-filled booklet most homeowners never actually read. Buried deep in section 14.3, I found it. All garage doors must remain closed when not in active use. Failure to comply may result in penalties as deemed necessary by the board. That vague phrase, as deemed necessary, gave them the power to fine us whenever they wanted. The more I read, the angrier I got. I wasn't the only one either. As I asked around, neighbors shared similar stories. One family had been fined $50 because their garage door was left cracked open for ventilation on a hot day. Another woman was fined because her teenager forgot to close the door after grabbing his skateboard. The pattern was clear. This wasn't about safety or aesthetics. It was about money. And the HOA had been quietly raking in thousands. That's when I decided I wasn't going to roll over. I challenged the fine, sending a formal letter to the HOA board demanding an explanation. Days later, I got my response, a curt email stating that the fine stands and additional resistance may lead to escalated consequences. That phrase, escalated consequences, haunted me. What did they mean? Was my home at risk? Could they actually come after me for such a small violation? That night, I barely slept, staring at the glowing red numbers of my alarm clock, wondering what I had gotten myself into. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about $75. It was about control. If I gave in now, what would they take next? And before I continue, let me pause here. If you've ever faced an unfair HOA fine or a crazy neighborhood rule, you'll want to stick around. Because what happened next shocked my entire street and exposed secrets no one saw coming. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because I've got even more unbelievable HOA stories you won't want to miss. Now, let's get back into it. I didn't realize it at the time, but pushing back would set off a chain of events that spiraled far beyond a simple garage door fine. The HOA wasn't just charging us, they were hiding something much bigger. And I was about to uncover it. The next HOA meeting was held on a Thursday evening in the community clubhouse. I walked in with my violation notice clutched tightly in my hand, determined to get answers. The room smelled faintly of coffee and cheap carpet cleaner, and the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. At the head table sat 5 board members, all in black blazers that looked more like uniforms than casual attire. Their faces were stern, unreadable. When it was my turn to speak, I laid the notice on the table and asked why a simple mistake had been treated like a criminal act. $75 for leaving a garage door open? That's not enforcement, that's extortion, I said, my voice echoing in the half-empty hall. The board president, a tall man with sharp glasses and a clipped tone, leaned forward. Rules exist for a reason. Open garage doors invite theft, lower property values, and disturb community uniformity. I countered, uniformity doesn't mean stripping people of common sense. What if someone's working in their garage? What if kids are coming in and out? His eyes narrowed. Then they should manage their time more carefully. The silence in the room was deafening. A few neighbors avoided my eyes, but I caught a slight nod from Mrs. Patterson, The elderly woman who lived across from me. That nod gave me courage. The board voted unanimously to uphold my fine. Just like that, the decision was final. But as I gathered my things, I heard whispers from 2 other homeowners who had also been fined. Their frustration mirrored mine. That night, we met in secret at my kitchen table. We formed a small alliance determined to push back. We started collecting stories. A single mom fined for leaving her garage door cracked while unloading groceries. A retired veteran fined for forgetting to close his while tending to his lawn mower. Every tale was more absurd than the last. The more we dug, the clearer it became. The HOA wasn't protecting the neighborhood, they were profiting off it. But how deep did it go? Before we could find out, something strange happened. One of our group members, Tom, received a second violation, this time for a completely different reason. According to the letter, his garage light had been left on overnight. The fine? Another $75. But Tom swore the light was off. He suspected someone had tampered with his property just to issue the ticket. That's when I realized, the HOA wasn't just enforcing rules. They were manufacturing violations. And if they were willing to target Tom, we could all be next. So, we decided to take the riskier route. We planned to attend the next meeting not as complainers, but as investigators. We would demand to see the HOA's financial records, to prove that these ridiculous fines were nothing but a revenue scheme. But what we didn't know was that exposing them would put us in direct conflict with people who had far more to lose than we imagined. And that's where the real trouble began. The following week, our group showed up early at the clubhouse. We weren't there to argue about one fine, we were there to pull back the curtain. I had done my research. Under state law, HOAs are required to keep financial records transparent and accessible to residents upon request. That meant the board couldn't legally refuse us. When the meeting began, the president droned through the agenda, landscaping budgets, community pool repairs, and upcoming holiday decorations. My patience wore thin. Finally, when the floor opened for comments, I stood. I request access to the HOA's financial statements, I said clearly, my voice steadier than I felt. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. The treasurer, a woman with perfectly coiffed hair and a pearl necklace, shifted in her chair. Why would you need those records? She asked coolly. Because homeowners deserve to know where their money is going. We've seen a surge in garage door fines. We want proof those funds are being used for the community, not for padding pockets. The room stirred. Murmurs rippled across the audience. The president banged his gavel. This is not the time or place. Yes, it is, I interrupted. We're following the bylaws. Transparency isn't optional. The president's jaw clenched. For a tense moment, I thought they might actually deny us outright. But then, reluctantly, he said, very well. You'll have access. But only during business hours, and only under board supervision. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. We scheduled our review for the following Tuesday. When the day came, I walked into the HOA office with Tom and Mrs. Patterson by my side. The treasurer handed us a thick binder. At first glance, everything looked normal. Budget lines for landscaping, maintenance, utilities. But then Tom pointed at a section labeled Miscellaneous Income. Tens of thousands of dollars had flowed in over the past year under that vague category. Almost all of it came from fines. Look at this, Mrs. Patterson whispered. Garage violations alone brought in nearly $15,000 last year. I felt my pulse quicken. That was money siphoned from hardworking neighbors for nothing more than cracked doors and forgotten switches. And where was it going? That's when we noticed another line item, administrative expenses. The numbers matched almost perfectly. In other words, the board was funneling our fines into their own operating budget. We snapped photos discreetly with our phones, careful not to draw attention. But just as we were about to close the binder, the treasurer re-entered the room. Her eyes narrowed. You've seen enough, she said flatly. Something in her tone chilled me. We left the office quickly, clutching the evidence like it was gold. That night, our group gathered at Tom's house to review the photos. The more we studied the numbers, the more damning they became. But just as we were discussing how to present the evidence to the entire neighborhood, headlights flashed outside. A black SUV idled in front of Tom's driveway. The engine hummed for several minutes before pulling away slowly. "Did you see that?" Tom whispered. "They're watching us." For the first time, I realized how dangerous this was becoming. This wasn't just about petty fines anymore. The HOA board had something to hide, and they were willing to intimidate anyone who got too close. Still, we knew one thing for certain: we couldn't back down now. The night after the black SUV incident, I barely slept. My phone buzzed with messages from Tom and Mrs. Patterson, each of us replaying the scene in our heads. Who was in that vehicle? Why had it parked so deliberately outside his house? The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. This was no coincidence. The next morning, as I backed out of my driveway, I noticed a small orange tag on my mailbox. Another violation notice. My stomach twisted as I ripped it open. Improper lawn maintenance. Grass height exceeds HOA standards. Fine, $75. It was absurd. My lawn was freshly mowed 2 days ago. They were targeting me now, trying to scare me into silence. I refused to be intimidated. That evening, I called an emergency meeting of our small alliance. Tom arrived first, looking more exhausted than usual. "You won't believe this," he muttered, dropping a notice on my table. "Now they're saying I left my trash bins visible from the street. Another $75. Mrs. Patterson shuffled in, clutching her cane. Her face was pale. "They fined me too," she said softly, "for having a wind chime on my porch. They called it a nuisance object." The room fell silent. One by one, the board was coming after us. "They're trying to break us apart," I said finally. "But we can't let them." Tom slammed his fist on the table. "So what do we do? If we keep fighting, they'll bury us in fines." I took a deep breath. "Then we fight smarter. We don't just argue, we expose them." We decided our best chance was to rally the neighborhood. If everyone knew the truth about the HOA's financial scheme, the board couldn't silence us all. We printed flyers, carefully worded so they sounded professional but direct. "Do you know where your HOA fines are going? Join us for a community meeting this Saturday." The plan was simple: present the photos, the records, and the proof of corruption. But things didn't stay simple for long. On Friday afternoon, the day before our meeting, I returned home to find my garage door half open. I knew I'd shut it that morning. My heart pounded as I stepped inside. Tools were scattered across the floor. A box of old photo albums lay overturned. Nothing valuable was missing, but everything felt disturbed, violated. On the workbench, taped to a hammer, was a folded piece of paper. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, in blocky letters, were 3 words: "Stop or else." I stumbled back, nearly dropping the note. Whoever had been inside wanted me to know they could get to me anytime. When I told Tom and Mrs. Patterson, their faces drained of color. "They've crossed a line," Tom said. "This isn't intimidation anymore. It's a threat." But if their goal was to silence me, they failed. Fear turned into fire. "Then we go through with the meeting," I said firmly. "We show the whole neighborhood what they're doing. If they want to scare us, fine. But they're not going to win." Saturday arrived with heavy gray clouds hanging over the mountains. By the time the meeting began in my driveway, more than 30 neighbors had gathered, some curious, others furious, all waiting to hear the truth. As I stood before them, holding the binder photos in my hands, I knew there was no turning back. This was our moment to either break free or make ourselves targets. And what I didn't realize was that the board had already prepared their countermove. The sky threatened rain as I stepped onto my driveway, but the crowd of neighbors didn't budge. Dozens of eyes stared at me, waiting. My hands trembled as I held up the photographs of the HOA's financial records. "Every one of us has been fined," I began, projecting my voice as far as I could. "Some for garage doors, some for trash bins, even for wind chimes. But what you don't know is where your money is going." Gasps rippled through the crowd as I explained the miscellaneous income and how fines funneled directly into the board's administrative budget. I passed around copies of the records, and neighbors leaned in, whispering angrily. "This is theft," someone shouted. "They're lining their own pockets," another voice called. The energy shifted from frustration to outrage. That's when the board arrived. 3 black SUVs pulled up, doors slamming in unison. Out stepped the president, the treasurer, and 2 other board members, all dressed in the same black blazers, their faces stone cold. They marched up the driveway like enforcers. "This gathering is unauthorized," the president barked. "Disperse immediately or face fines for violating HOA regulations." The neighbors didn't move. If anything, they drew closer together. I lifted the binder high. "We know the truth now. You've been using our fines as your personal ATM." The treasurer's lips tightened. "Those funds are allocated for community operations. You're twisting facts to sow division." I held up a photo on my phone of the exact line item. "Then explain why garage fines, $15,000, show up almost dollar for dollar in your administrative expenses. Where did the money really go? New landscaping? Pool maintenance? Or your salaries?" The crowd erupted. People shouted questions, demands, accusations. The board tried to shout over them, but the tide had turned. Then, something I didn't expect happened. Mrs. Patterson, quiet until now, stepped forward. Her cane shook in her grip as she pointed at the president. "You fined me for a wind chime," she said, her voice trembling but loud. "I've lived here 30 years, and I've never seen such cruelty. You people don't protect this neighborhood, you strangle it." Neighbors clapped, cheered, raised their voices with hers. The board president's face darkened. "This ends now," he snapped. He gestured to 2 men in black uniforms who had arrived with them. Enforcers. HOA security. They started pushing through the crowd, trying to grab the binder from my hands. "Don't let them!" Tom shouted. Chaos broke out. Neighbors formed a wall around me, blocking the enforcers. One of them shoved a man to the ground, and people screamed. But instead of scattering, the crowd pushed back. Someone yanked the enforcer's arm, another grabbed his sleeve, and suddenly it wasn't just me against the HOA, it was the whole neighborhood. I raised the binder above my head. "This is our proof. We won't be silent anymore." Rain began to fall, soaking papers, blurring ink, but the fight didn't stop. The board president, drenched and furious, shouted over the storm. "You think you've won? You have no authority. The fines will continue. And those who resist will lose their homes." A hush fell. Lose their homes. The ultimate threat. For a heartbeat, fear gripped me. Could they really foreclose on us over fines? Then I looked at the neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder, their faces hard with determination. "No," I said, my voice steady. "The only ones losing anything here will be you." The crowd roared in agreement. The board realized they'd lost control of the night. Their enforcers backed off, retreating toward the SUVs. The president glared at me with a promise in his eyes. This wasn't over. And as the SUVs pulled away, tires splashing in the rain, I knew he was right. Because now the real battle was about to begin. The night after the showdown, my neighborhood felt different. People waved at each other, talked in driveways, and for the first time, we weren't just neighbors, we were allies. But underneath the new unity lurked fear. The board's threats still hung heavy: lose your homes. The next morning, I woke to another envelope taped to my garage. My heart sank, but when I ripped it open, it wasn't a fine. It was a summons. The HOA was suing me for defamation and disruption of community order. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the paper until my coffee went cold. Sued for exposing the truth. It felt hopeless. How could I fight an entire board with their lawyers and endless funds? But before despair could take over, my phone buzzed. It was Tom. "We're not letting you face this alone," he said firmly. "Meet us at the clubhouse tonight." When I arrived, the place was packed. Dozens of neighbors had gathered, some holding copies of their own violation notices, others carrying folders of documents. Mrs. Patterson was there too, her cane tapping the tile floor. She raised her hand. "I spoke with my niece today," she said. "She's a lawyer. She reviewed everything you collected. She thinks not only can we beat this lawsuit, we can take down the entire board." The room erupted in cheers. Fueled by that momentum, we filed a countersuit the following week. Fraud, misuse of funds, harassment, intimidation, we laid it all out. And once word spread, more neighbors stepped forward with stories, receipts, and even old emails from board members bragging about how much money they'd made from fines. The board tried to fight back. They hired expensive attorneys, flooded us with paperwork, and doubled down on violations. But every time they attacked one of us, 10 more neighbors joined the cause. The real twist came 3 weeks later, when an anonymous envelope appeared on my porch. Inside was a flash drive. No note, no return address. Just a single file labeled deletes. I plugged it into my laptop, and what I found made my blood run cold. The files showed not only the misused funds, but proof the board president had been siphoning money directly into his personal bank account. Tens of thousands of dollars, stolen. We didn't know who had leaked it. Maybe a whistleblower inside the board, but it was the final nail in their coffin. Armed with that evidence, our lawyer filed an emergency motion. Within weeks, the board president and treasurer resigned in disgrace. The entire HOA leadership collapsed, forced out by the very homeowners they had tried to control. When the judge finally dismissed their lawsuit against me, the courtroom broke into applause. It wasn't just my victory, it was ours. Months later, we elected a new board. Neighbors we trusted, people who cared more about community than control. Fines dropped dramatically, rules relaxed, and for the first time in years, our neighborhood felt free. As for me, I still keep the violation notice that started it all. The $75 for leaving my garage door open. It's framed on my wall as a reminder. Sometimes the smallest battles uncover the biggest wars. And if you're watching this, remember, always read the fine print, always stand up when something feels wrong, and never let fear silence you. Because sometimes one open garage door can open the door to justice.